Hello and welcome to Sabha television with me, Frank Pereira. Opposition parties on Thursday, that is today, approached the Election Commission seeking that the union budget's presentation be deferred during the poll process for 5 states. Led by the Congress, representatives from several opposition parties including the Trinamool Congress, Janata Dal United, Samajwadi Party, Bahujan Samaj Party and the Rashtriya Janata Dal reached the poll panel to raise their objections over the budget schedule to be presented on February 1st, just days ahead of the polls in Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Goa and Manipur scheduled between February 4th and March 8th. Opposition leaders are of the opinion that presentation of the budget prior to the polls will vitiate free and fair polls. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will discuss if the general budget should be postponed. Joining me on the program today are Justice Satish Chandra, former Judge, Allahabad High Court, PDT Achary, constitutional expert and former Secretary General of the Lok Sabha, Priya Ranjan, senior journalist, and on the phone line from Chennai is T.S. Krishamurthy, former Chief Election Commissioner. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with me on this edition of The Big Picture. Justice, I'd like to start with you, of course, and ask you, do you think that the opposition parties have a case in what they are demanding right now, that the budget should be held after the polls are conducted to these 5 crucial states?
Before the announcement of the election, the schedule was already known to the public domain that a budget will be preponed. Later on, the elections were announced. So Election Commission might have taken the notice of it. The budget is going to be presented like this. And in the past also, in 2012, the budget was postponed due to the elections. So disturbance of the schedule is permissible. In the past practice, it happened. So this time, now please this of the opposition that there will be fair and fearless election.
But is there any law governing this?
Certainly not.
Okay.
Certainly not. This is merely a customary law. You can say the budget is presented on the last day of the February. That is only customary law. But in law book, this is not a reference anywhere.
Indeed, indeed. Mr. Achary, as Justice just mentioned, of course, this is not the first time that an issue like this has come up. It has happened in 2012 as well, when the present president was the finance minister. Then, heeding to the demands of the opposition parties, the budget was postponed, past February as a result of what was happening. 5 states, these very 5 states were going to poll in 2012 as well. So do you see the government doing the same now in 2017?
See, there are 2 aspects to this. One is the government postponing the presentation of budget, yielding to the demand from the opposition. That is one thing. As has happened earlier, government on its own can do that. Well, after all, it is the government which has, advanced the schedule or changed the whole schedule. The earlier schedule, we have been following that for quite some time. And this time, the government has changed it. So the government can certainly listen to the opposition, and they can postpone it. It's up to them. Now, the other aspect is about the Election Commission having powers to direct the government to postpone the election, because, postpone the presentation of budget because of the elections. Now, that is a question which cannot be easily answered, because I have not been able to see any provision in any law which empowers the Election Commission to direct the government to postpone the presentation of budget. Of course, it is said that Election Commission, yes, and that is true. Election Commission is vested with a lot of plenary powers under Article 324. And the question may be asked whether Election Commission can't use that power and ask the government to postpone it. But that, is not very clear whether Election Commission can use the powers under 324 and ask the government to postpone the budget. And then this is a national budget. Elections are being held in some states. But I can say one thing in this connection, that Election Commission may give a suggestion to the government to hold back certain things, relating specifically to the election, the poll-bound states. Maybe. I'm not very sure about that, but that is, an idea which comes to my mind. Maybe.
Maybe.
Because in the Model Code of Conduct, one of the points in the Model Code of Conduct is that the ministers shall not go and make announcement about projects and schemes in that poll-bound state. So taking a cue from that, I can suggest that maybe the Election Commission is well within its jurisdiction to give such a suggestions to the government. Now, whether it is mandatory or not, I am not going to say anything on that at the moment.
A suggestion, not a direction, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think Mr. T.S. Krishamurthy can throw some more light on that and see, what exactly the powers of the CEC are when it comes to Article 324. Mr. Krishamurthy, can you throw some light on, what Article 324 really says? Can the Election Commission direct the government to postpone the budget, or can it just advise the government?
Well, I don't think Election Commission has an authority to postpone the budget, but it can certainly give suggestions, particularly in the light of the Part 7 of the Model Code of Conduct, where it clearly says that discretionary funds use of it should be, no announcement should be made in respect of that. But what I would suggest is that there should be a healthy reconciliation between the right of the Parliament to have the budget, the right of the government to present a budget, and the right of the Election Commission to hold free and fair elections. Now, in respect of announcements relating to the poll-bound states, certainly the Election Commission say that you should not can say or advise that no specific schemes in respect of these states can be announced. Now, as far as the national scene is concerned, it's very difficult for the Election Commission to say not to announce, but I think a possible Lakshman Rekha can be drawn after a healthy dialogue between both the institutions. So what could be contained in the budget and what can be announced after March 8th, they could have some kind of a discussion and arrive at a healthy reconciliation so that there is no undue advantage for the ruling party in power.
Indeed. All right. I think that is clear now, Mr. Dash, that, the Election Commission cannot give a direction, or a directive, but it can give a suggestion, is what the former CEC is suggesting. But then let's bring in the president now into the picture. Do you think that the president can give a direction to the government? Let's not forget that he was the finance minister in 2012 when he postponed the budget to March. So can he give a suggestion or a directive to the government?
I don't think so, but Mr. Achary and others are better qualified to talk on this. But I think the president, of course, can always advise his government. So, but I do not think that he can give a direction, because the president in the normal running of the government is supposed to be, aided and advised by the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So, but on this question of the Election Commission advising that the budget should have certain things and it should not have certain things, that I find would be grossly inappropriate. First of all, the Election Commission has no idea of the economic conditions and the government's financial position itself to be able to say what is required to get into the budget and what is not required to get into the budget. So since it's a national budget and elections are being held only in 5 states, it will not be proper. And in any case, I believe that the model of code of conduct is, if there is a violation of it, means the government of the day offers some allurement or influences something, some policy decisions of the government that could influence the voter, then the Election Commission can intervene at that stage. But the Election Commission cannot beforehand prejudge and suggest as to what the government should be doing and not doing. In any case, budget is a state of, it's a set of announcements. Certain announcements are implemented with immediate effect. Others are promises. If it is not the budget, even the President's address to the joint sitting of Parliament, is it itself supposed to be the agenda of the government? for the year that the president spells out, and it is also supposed to be a policy statement. So there is no end to the election commission, if trying to ensure free and fair election in states and trying to constrain the center from making policy statements. However, I believe that if specific policies which the election commission, after this announcement is made, feels that could be violative of the Model Code of Conduct, it could intervene. And indeed, in the past, it has done so. And certain policy decisions or announcements have been withdrawn by the government of the day in view of the Elections Commission's observations. But the broader point is that the opposition parties which have raised this issue of the budget having been advanced to the 1st of February, that could influence the elections to the state. Now, I think the opposition parties are waking up too late because this proposal of advancing the budget to 1st of February, in fact, the government's decision has been known for quite some time. The opposition did not make any objection at that point. They knew that the terms of these respective 5 state assemblies were coming to an end and elections would be declared. That would be a class.
But Mr. Dash, there was no formal announcement to that effect.
But there was a cabinet decision which was made, and it was announced. So it has been known that on the 1st of February. But on the government's part, also we know that the government had appointed an expert committee to go into this question of changing the financial year as such. And that expert committee has also recently come out with its report, headed by Mr. Shankaracharya, who suggesting that the financial year would be, it will be better to shift the financial year to the calendar year.
Indeed.
And January to December rather than from April to March. As is the case in 157 countries. So if that kind of that kind of a recommendation has come, and if the government is to go in for a change in the financial year, then the budget would be required to be presented in November perhaps. So in view of that, this particular budget and this year, maybe the government can take a decision, but it has to be the government's prerogative.
Indeed.
And
yes.
One simple point I wanted to make, that if some of the opposition parties, as they have said, and in fact the West Bengal finance minister walked out yesterday from a pre-budget consultation with the finance minister, saying there is a financial emergency in this country. If that is what some of the opposition parties feel, then I wonder how is it possible to actually tie the government with any constraint,
sure,
including the Model Code of Conduct from governing the country.
Correct.
Yes.
The democracy and holding the free and fair elections are the essential features of the democracy.
Yes.
Presentation of budget. The apprehension is this, that in budget the government will announce some concessions. For example, under Section 80 of the Income Tax Act, they can prescribe some schemes, some relief in taxation like this, and that may influence the voter. This is the only apprehension. But fact remains that whatever concession will be announced in this one, that will also have the impact on the voters of the 5 states where the elections has been already announced. But our voter is very wise enough. And you have seen in the past that the crowd was never converted into vote. So the voter of this country understands what budget is saying, so what concession is saying, so what will be the impact. They have the long planning. So it will make hardly any difference for this one. And about the election commission, because the duty of the election commission is to hold the free and fair election. In that purview or in that definition, they can certainly have a right to advise, to intervene in the matter if they think so. This is my submission.
Okay, fair enough. But can they give a directive?
Directive, there is no provision in the law. Whatever they will do, that is subject to the scrutiny of the Supreme Court.
Sure,
or
fair
High
enough.
Court.
Fair enough. Mr. Achary, going back to a point that Mr. Dash was making about, the opposition waking up too late. But, such a decision of such a magnitude, a decision that is change the way the budget is going to be presented in the future, a tradition that has been going on for several decades. Do you believe, looking at it in hindsight, that the opposition should have been consulted in the first place so as to ensure that they were on board?
Yeah, there can't be two opinions about that. Because we have been following this practice for a very, very, very long time. And when you are switching over to a new schedule, certainly the government of the day should have consulted the opposition. They should have been taken into confidence. Only after that they should have done this changeover. But I don't know whether it has been done, because obviously it has not been done. It was just a cabinet decision, that is what I understand. But that is not enough. And that is one of the reasons why they are today very agitated. And then, of course, they have a genuine concern that if the budget is presented on 1st of February, and after 4 days the elections will start, certainly it will have an impact on the electorate. Their concern is very, very genuine. But of course, the ruling party will always do that. The government of the day will always do that. They will announce certain swaps and all that, because they want to have political advantage. That is there. But then there are certain things, which should be done to maintain a certain balance. Now, Election Commission has a responsibility to conduct the election, free and fair elections. And for that, whatever is required to be done by the Election Commission can be done. They have been given that power. I mean, so many Supreme Court decisions are there which say emphatically that Election Commission has been vested with plenary powers under Article 324 to ensure that free and fair elections are conducted in this country. And free and fair elections are a sine qua non for democracy. Democracy cannot exist if elections are not free and fair.
True.
So that is the thing. Such a great responsibility is vested in the Election Commission. Now, how they can go about it? The Election Commission in our country is a very mature organization, and they take a comprehensive view of things, and they have a way of dealing with issues and particularly tricky situations, and they have done a wonderful job in conducting the elections in a relatively free and fair manner in this country. There are no two opinions about that. But in this particular case, the issue was whether the Election Commission can give a direction to the government to postpone the budget. There, of course, there are some reservations, whether the plenary powers extend to that. But otherwise, as the former CEC, Mr. Krishamurthy has very clearly said, that they can, I had also said that, in fact, Election Commission can have a serious kind of discussion with the government, because after all, it is their responsibility to conduct the elections, free and fair elections in this country. Certainly, they have a responsibility, a constitutional obligation also, to discuss this matter seriously with the government.
Indeed.
And ask them to hold it back. Whatever sops they want to present in the budget for these states, particularly the state-specific, the poll-bound state-specific schemes and projects and so on. They can hold back something.
Sure. Mr. Krishamurthy, it's a constitutional obligation of the Election Commission to ensure that free and fair elections take place in the country. It is also the constitutional right of the government to present the budget as such. So, in a situation like this, we believe that the moral code of conduct might be interfering with governance. So, do you believe that we need to look back at the moral code of conduct itself going forward?
In fact, I have always been saying that model code of conduct needs to be given a statutory shape. Unless it is given a statutory shape, it has only a persuasive value. And if there is a violation of model code of conduct, it is the party that is taken to task, not the government. So we have got to give some statutory shape to the model code of conduct. The second point I want to stress is, let us assume for argument's sake that there is a dissolution of the House sometime in March or April. The model code of conduct will extend itself for another 45 or 60 days. Do you mean to say that the government cannot present its budget? So we have to draw the line, the limit between the model code of conduct and the constitutional responsibility to present annual statement of accounts and the measures for meeting financial liabilities. So there has to be a healthy reconciliation, and I'm sure it can be done by a proper dialogue. For example, the most important far-reaching changes can be announced on March 9th or 10th before the results are announced, after the elections are over. The less far-reaching changes, which are mainly important for the point of view of carrying out the government activities, can be announced early. So a part of the budget can be given after March 8th. So that is my view. But the Election Commission and the government should have a dialogue and find a healthy reconciliation. You cannot indefinitely postpone the budget just because 2 more elections are held as a result of dissolution of some state houses. So we must find a healthy solution.
Indeed, a healthy solution is what the CEC, former CEC is talking about, Mr. Dash. Elections, like you said, keep happening, around the year in India.
I quite agree with him. Means you cannot shut down the government because elections are happening at, all the time. Elections are happening somewhere or other. And after all, the purpose of election, is to elect a government to govern. And it is, otherwise, that will be, if you take leave from governance, that's a greater disservice to democracy, I believe, and to welfare of people. So if you look at it from and in the present situation, economic conditions that we've had following the demonetization, and there are external global economic environment, there are so many challenges that the Indian economy is facing. In view of that, to constrain the government in any way from making policy decisions or announcing policy decisions, including the budget. I include the President's address to joint sitting of Parliament also in that, which is on the first day of the budget session of Parliament usually. So there will be no end to suggesting. So I don't think that the Election Commission should make any preemptive strike on either the President's address or the budget, or the Prime Minister or any of the ministers making any statement. The Election Commission should come in, and rightly so, if it feels that the announcements made are violative of the Model Code of Conduct or are meant at alluring voters and influencing voters in the states which are going to polls or any section of voters. That will be better than shutting down the government in any form or constraining the government from taking policy decisions or making announcements.
In the present scenario, but Justice, do you see any harm in the budget being presented on the 28th of February as it has always been done?
First time this situation arises before the Election Commission. First time this. So I agree that on first budget is going to be presented, on fourth election is going to be started. So there may be some shadow, this is the apprehension. But at the same time, I also agree that Election Commission and government should enter into a dialogue. And they should see what are the concessionary provision that can be influenced or not. Because by having the shadow on the election, one can say justice should not only be done, but appears that it has been done. So there should be no doubt. So there must be dialogue between the Election Commission and the government and see the provision, what they are going to start this one and whether that will impact on the election or not. Indeed. This is my suggestion.
Okay. I've got 3 minutes left on the program, so I'd like to get final closing comments from all my guests, starting with you, Mr. Achary. The government has said that the opposition is politicizing the constitutional right and the constitutional duty of the government. Do you agree with that?
Well, politicizing, this is something which we often hear from both the government and also the opposition. Naturally, they can't liberate themselves from politics, neither the government nor the opposition. So I don't think there is much importance or much significance to be attached to this kind of statement.
Indeed. All right. Mr. Krishamurthy, your final closing comments, of course, on the program. I want to know from you, what do you think is the way forward? How is the Election Commission going to look at this entire scenario now?
I'm sure the Election Commission has a very important role to play to tell the government that there are limits to the presentation of budget during the election process period. But at the same time, it cannot deny the government's right to present the budget. So, for example, the economic survey Can it be presented or not? That is the question. Economic survey indicates the possible lines of action in the years to come as to how to deal with the economic problems. Now, do you say that under the model code of conduct we can prevent it? So there are limits to all these things, and I think, as I said, there must be a resolution, healthy resolution, an informal dialogue, and clearly indicate, understand that the fair and free elections are as important as the presentation of budget, and there must be some kind of a resolution. And I'm sure it is possible, given proper application of mind and healthy discussions. It should be possible. And you cannot prevent the budget because, after all, budget is required to be presented every year and the Parliament's approval is to be required. As I said, maybe budget can be split into two parts. One part to be done on the 1st of, where many issues already have been decided can be carried on.
Indeed.
And on the 8th, the balance major changes, policy changes could be announced.
You know, with Mr. Krishamurthy's point, I quite agree. But you see, on only one issue that could arise in the process is concerning Parliament's privilege. You know, budget is a document that is not to be shared with anybody before it is shared with Parliament. And in the process, if the Election Commission gets into consultation on the budget as to what will go into the budget and what will not go into the budget, that will not be in order. I would look at it.
I have reservation.
The other question, because we know that even within the government, budget making is been a secretive exercise. Now, I wouldn't like it that way, but that has been the case.
Sure.
And to such an extent that it is not even shared with the cabinet till the very last hour.
I think Justice does not agree with you.
The presentation of the budget is, of course, a secretive exercise, but from the public domain. Otherwise, in the government, even the printer knows what he is typing about the budget. Even the vetter who vet the budget, he knows very well what is going on. And moreover, Election Commission is a very matured constitutional organization.
But all those people,
And
Justice, that
the
you mentioned are all locked in.
The problem is
They're all-
regarding the incentive, only incentive, what you are going to influence, that is incentive, only incentive part you can see.
But that does not
Or
come
that
out
can
in the
be
public.
postponed, incentive
that does not come out in the public domain. It remains
Yes.
with those very few people.
Naturally.
Yes.
Even in the court, we see so many secret things in the sealed envelope.
Sure. Okay.
Mr. Achary
Yeah, Mr. Achary,
bear
final quick comment.
that Mr. Delton, as the Exchequer of Chancellor of Exchequer, had to resign.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
our parliamentary
Fair enough.
The
Yes,
idea,
Mr.
the idea is not that Election Commission should discuss the budgetary proposals in detail with the government. That is not at all. That is not
at all.
It's not meant to be so. They can't do that, and they have no business to do that. Point is, Election Commission can always caution the government against announcing so many soaps which will influence the voters. From that point of view,
That
they
incentives,
can certainly tell the government that you don't do that, hold it over, and then you can do it later after the elections are over. That much the Election Commission can say.
Indeed, that much the Election Commission can
can
do,
do.
but what the Election Commission will say will be known in the next couple of days, and we'll know for a fact what course is taken. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
And that
Justice
is subject to scrutiny.
Yes,
of the
that
law.
will be subject to scrutiny of the law as well. Thank you so much, Justice Satish Chandra, PDT Achary, Priya, Ranjan Dash, and T.S. Krishamurthy for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you so much for watching.